I'm Eleanor from Fast Fashion Therapy, and in this video today I'm going to take you through the basics of darning. It's a great technique for using on a lot of different items of clothing and different styles of fabric, but in the video today we're going to focus on using it on knitwear. It's really useful for mending holes in knitwear because it stops the hole from growing any bigger whilst creating a new bit of fabric in the area that's been damaged. There's many different styles of darning, and this one's the most basic one, which you can either do in a visible or invisible style of mending. I'm going to show you it as a visible style of mending today because it makes it a lot easier to learn, and it's a good way of showing how repair can be used as a way of adding decoration at the same time as fixing the holes in your clothing. Here I've got a few examples of different styles of darning. These slippers are a good example of a visible style of mending, using different coloured yarns to the original item of clothing to turn the darn into a piece of decoration as well as a form of repair. All the areas of coloured yarn is where the holes were. These slippers were really moth-eaten, so it's become almost an entirely new style of slipper through the repair that's happened. I've also got a jumper here. This is the jumper I'm going to be working on today, that has lots of different darns going across it. You can see all the different stages of darning across this jumper. This kind of piece is a really good way of practicing your darn. If you have got a jumper that you just know you're not going to wear again for whatever reason, keep it and use it as a base to practice on. All these little stages of darn can be really helpful to look back at when you're learning how to do it. I've also got another form of darning that's actually on a woven fabric that is more of an invisible style of darning, just so you can see the difference. So here I've tried to match the yarns that I'm using to darn to the pattern of the shirt. So it's quite hard to see, but you can just see the texture there is slightly different. If you want it to be a completely invisible darn, it's just important that you use a matching thread in terms of thickness. That way it will blend in as you're working your way across the hole. So to get started with your darning, you're just going to need a few pieces of basic kit. The main thing you're probably going to have to look out for is a darning mushroom. So we've got two examples of darning mushrooms here. These are two vintage mushrooms. So this is a wider one with a flat top, which is quite good for mending larger holes. This one is a double-ended one that is a bit narrower and has this curved edge, which can be quite useful for mending areas where you want the darn to be 3D, say on the toe of a sock. You're also going to need some darning needles. So we've got a few different sizes of darning needle here. The main difference between a darning needle and a normal needle is just that it can be longer in length and it will have a bigger eye. So it might be quite tricky to see, but it should be a larger eye so you can fit a thicker yarn through it than normal embroidery. If you're getting a darning needle pack, you'll normally get a few sizes in there. So you'll want to try and match the needle to the thickness of the item of clothing that you're working on. Also going to need some yarn to work with. So here's a few examples of darning yarns that you can buy on cards, normally in sewing shops or haberdashery shops. So these are actually vintage ones again, so they've been donated secondhand, but you can get similar things to this new from sewing shops, which is just the only difference between a normal yarn and a darning yarn is normally the quantity that you get it in. So when you're buying these little mending yarn cards, there'll be a smaller quantity than you would if you're buying a ball of wool. When you're looking for your yarn to match to whatever it is that you're repairing, the main thing that you want to look out for is the thickness of the yarn. So I'm working with this merino yarn, which is quite fine because I'm going to be working on this jumper, which is also quite a fine knit. If you're working on something chunkier, you want your yarn to be thicker. So to start off, you just want to cut yourself a length of yarn that's about 30 to 45 centimetres in length. And you can thread up your needle, just a single length of it with a little tail hanging out the top of the needle and no knot at the end. So when you're starting your darn, you want to work from the reverse of the fabric. So I've got this jumper inside out and you just want to get your hole so it's going in the middle of your darning mushroom. You want to hold it securely in place, but you don't want to put too much tension on so that you're stretching the hole. You want it to just rest quite comfortably around the mushroom. And then to start, you're just going to start with a double stitch, so 2 stitches on the same spot, just to the bottom kind of corner of the hole. So you want to leave enough space so that you can get at least 2 rows of stitching to the side of the hole and 2 stitches down away from the bottom of the hole. You can do more than this if you want to make more of a feature out of your darn, but it's just important that you've got at least 2 stitches and 2 rows just to secure the yarn in place. So you do your double stitch on the spot like that, and then you've just got your tail there that you can just trim down, and that's enough to secure your yarn into the fabric. And to start, you're just working up the side of the hole, doing 2 rows of stitching. So it's just like a straight stitch, so you can weave the needle in and out. When you get to the end of your first row of stitching and you're working back in the other direction, you want to be careful to just leave a little loop of yarn at the end of your row. So it doesn't need to be quite as big as that, but you can see that there's just a bit of yarn just sitting above the surface there that I can get my needle in. So I'm going to make that a little bit smaller. That just leaves room so that when you wash your piece of clothing that you've mended afterwards, there's a bit of room for the new piece of yarn to shrink. The jumper or whatever it is that you're working on has probably been washed before, and so it's already shrunk, whereas the new piece of yarn hasn't been. So that just gives it a bit of a kind of safety. So carry on working up the side of the hole, and when you reach the hole, you're just gonna carry on in the same way, but you're creating one big stitch that jumps over the hole. And then you just come out the other side. So you can see there, it's just one big stitch jumping over the hole. You carry on in this way, working all the way across the hole, filling in the stitches and the hole quite nice and tightly. So you want to keep your rows quite close together, and trying to remember to leave that loop at the end of each line. So as you can see, starting to build up the rows quite close next to each other, and it's starting to fill in the hole in one direction. When you get to the end of your piece of yarn that you're working with, you can secure it in place just like you did at the start of your stitching, just by doing 2 stitches on the spot. So as you start to come near the end of the hole, and you've filled in pretty much the whole area, you're carrying on in the same way until you have worked all the way across. And then you're going to do the same thing that you did at the start of the hole, and do a couple of lines of securing stitch, just going straight into the knit of the fabric. So just doing weaving up and down in the knit to create a nice running stitch down the side of the hole. I'm just doing 2 rows again here, but you can do more if you want to make more of a feature out of your darn. So once you've done that, you're going to turn and start working in the other direction. So you're kind of going at a 90-degree angle to the first row of stitching that you've done. You start by doing the same thing, having a securing line of stitching, just going to the side of the hole. This time it doesn't need to be 2 rows, you could just do 1 row. And you don't need to worry about catching the stitches or anything that you've got going in the other direction at this point. you can just do a normal straight stitch going down the side of the hole. So with this one, you carry on with your stitches until you hit the hole, and then what you're doing is you're going to start weaving under and over the yarns that are going in the opposite direction. So here we've got one, so I'm going to go over that one, under that one, over that one, under that one, over that one. You might not catch all the yarns depending on the shape of your hole, you're just doing the ones that you hit in that row. So after your first row, you're just going to carry on doing the same thing, working back and forth, but each row you're alternating which ones you went under and over to that you did on the last one. So here we're going under, and then over, under. You want to try and drag your piece of yarn kind of up so that the yarns stay close together as well in this direction. You can even use the needle to kind of push the yarns like closer together so you get quite a nice tight darn. You can carry on working this way all the way across the hole until you've filled in the whole area of the hole. This is definitely the fiddliest bit of darning, so this is the bit that will probably take the most practice in trying to get a nice even kind of structure to the weave of your darn. But I would say that when you're starting out, if you don't get it perfect, if you don't get everyone perfectly alternating, the structure is still going to hold together and you're still going to be able to repair your knitwear. It might just not be a kind of perfect even structure, but it could add a different texture or just kind of blend in anyway because of the yarn that you're using. So I'm starting to get to the end of the hole now, and you're just finishing off again in the same way that you started. So this is probably my last row of weaving under and over and coming out the other side. And you just want to do a couple of rows of stitching to the side of the hole again. On this edge it can be just the one row of stitching if that's what you fancy. You just need that at least the one to secure it in place. So you just do the double stitch at the end of your piece of yarn again to finish it off and trim that right down. So hopefully there you can see how it's all filled in, and when you turn it so that it's the right way around, it normally has a smoother finish from the other side. So there you can see that the hole's been filled in and you've secured the edges of the hole so it's not going to unravel anymore. And that's the finished darn.